lot of people say, oh, I just want to sort of, they're kind of dabbling in the idea of improving themselves. And the real way to do it is you got to write down what the fuck you want and then go after it. If you decide, I'm going to get down to bang, I'm going to do this, I'm going to run a marathon in less than 5 hours, I'm going to, you know, whatever the fuck it is, you got to write that shit down and go for it. What I tell people is the best advice I've ever heard, it's the best advice I ever came up with, is that live your life like you're the hero in your movie. Right now, you're in the part of the movie that starts and it shows you as a fucking loser. And just decide not to be a loser anymore. Live your life like there's a documentary crew following you around so that your kids one day would look back at it and see that documentary and look on it with pride, like, wow, my dad was a bad motherfucker. He really did what he had to do. Wow, my mom really got her shit together. I love a success story, but even more than a success story, I like a dude who fucks his life up and then gets it back together again story. Those are my favorite stories. And the way to do that, you gotta write shit down. You gotta think that you are the hero in your own fucking movie, and then you gotta sit down and you gotta write shit down. Write down what you need to do. Instead of being inspired, instead of choosing to be positive, instead of like improving constantly on the direction of trying to achieve whatever the fuck you have written down, you just sit around and spiral. You have to be able to have that honest assessment of yourself, and the only way you can do that is you're taking account of yourself all day long. You're taking account, you're writing down what the fuck you need to do, you're doing it, you have a mindset that you want to maintain throughout the day. Don't let the world maintain your mindset. You choose what mindset that you're going to maintain.
Stephen Pressfield wrote about it in The War of Art. He talks about this thing that we all have, and it's this voice in your head that wants you to do nothing, and he calls it resistance.
Yeah.
And he talks about this resistance that is in your head and that you have to decide that you are a professional. People have this extreme feeling in their mind when it comes to their associations with exercise. They want to avoid discomfort. They feel like any type of exercise is just like something to be avoided. That's not for me. Fuck that. I don't want to sweat. I don't want to strain. And a lot of times this association that they have is about the beginnings of getting in shape. It's not about once you're actually fit. Because once you're actually fit, exercise is something you look forward to. It's an alleviation of stress. It feels great. Like if I can't get a workout in, I look at my schedule. I go, oh shit, I don't have any time for a workout, which means I'm not going to get that good feeling. And so instead of looking at it like, oh, I've got to go grunt and sweat, I'm thinking I'm not going to feel good. I'm not going to feel relaxed. I'm not going to feel carefree. And I'm not going to feel even appreciative. Like my appreciation of things, it gets enhanced greatly after exercise. I just feel better. I feel like I can take things in for what they are rather than, you know, whatever the sensory data that I'm getting from any event is just one more distraction that gets in my way. And you know, that's a lot of times how I look at things if I'm overstressed or if I'm working too much. Move your body. Get it going. You'll feel better afterwards. I know you don't want to do it. I fucking hardly ever want to do it. I maybe want to actually do it 5 out of 10 times. But I do
maybe
it.
less. Yeah.
But I do it. Put your fucking shoes on. Get a sweat going, and then you're gonna feel pumped. And then invariably, I'll be in the middle of the workout. I'm sweating. I'm like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah.
And then I get into it. There's been many days where I didn't want to work out. I just didn't feel like I had the energy, and I just forced myself. And I think there's very few people out there that know how to force themselves. That's a learned. That's a learned skill. It's that kind of discipline and focus. You have to have like real rigid requirements of yourself, where you don't allow yourself to back out of things. And I don't think people put those kind of requirements on themselves as if it's a daily principle of life, like what you must get done. You know, you must brush your teeth, you must exercise for 45 minutes. And if you did that, I think you'd be healthier and happier, and your body would perform more smoothly. And if you require your body to do things like that, I think it rises to the occasion. There are very few people that have that kind of discipline, and excuses are a giant part of the problem. There's been many people that have just put their foot down and said, enough, I'm going to change my life. And they don't take any excuses, and they feel way better. diet is most certainly a part of that, but there's also a discipline aspect. And these things are not mutually exclusive. They exist together. They're all together. And they work symbiotically. The way your mindset affects the choices you make with your diet. And the mindset also affects the choices you make in terms of like whether or not you require yourself to exercise. And I think these are critical aspects that people like to gloss over, or they like to make excuses about. And they get very angry if you don't accept those excuses. And that's a sign that they're trying to enforce this standard and this idea and push it on you and give themselves an excuse. And it's one of the reasons why they get angry.
From like my perspective, I've seen my dad, and he was very like, he was carrying about 50 extra pounds.
Right.
And he didn't exercise. And he didn't have enough energy to exercise.
That's not
but
true.
But it didn't look
that's
like
not true.
that.
That's not true. He just didn't do it.
No, I don't believe that.
But when you say he didn't have enough energy to exercise, did he walk around?
Well, yeah,
Did
but
he
you can
walk to
drag yourself through things.
And you can drag yourself through an exercise routine. You can. Oh, you most certainly can. You most certainly can. You don't have to do a lot. You just have to do something. You walk up hills. You jump a little rope. You take a little tiny kettlebell. You do a couple cleans and presses. You do a few push-ups. You do a few sit-ups. You get your blood pumping. You're moving. You're alive. You're exercising. To say you don't have enough extra energy to exercise, that's crazy. Can you walk to the refrigerator? Then you can exercise. I'm not saying that you have to run marathons. You can exercise, and everyone should fucking exercise.
I agree. Everyone should exercise.
But don't ever say, these people are so crazy. They want you to believe, I don't have the energy to exercise. God damn it, everyone does. If you're alive, you can exercise.
I believe that. I've been there. I know I'm a different case, but I've seen my dad there, and then here's the thing. He's exercising now.
Sure, he's got less weight on his body. He feels better.
And he has energy.
That's wonderful. He could have exercised then too. He would have felt shittier, for sure. Wouldn't have felt as good as he's feeling now. But to give people this excuse, I don't have the energy to exercise, that is crazy to say. Can you walk to the fucking refrigerator? Yes. Well, you can exercise. You don't have to do anything crazy. Just walk around the block. There's 80-year-old ladies who take yoga with me. They're fucking really old, and they're in there. They're going after it. They could easily say, I don't have the energy to do that. But they don't. It's a mental attitude. They make a decision.
I agree. Like, there's a lot of it's discipline. You're going to get people who just won't exercise.
You don't have to kill yourself. You don't have to go to a CrossFit class and try to do the workout of the day. You don't have to go nuts and do clean and presses with 150 pounds. You don't have to do that, but you have to do something. Just get your blood moving. Your body has requirements. It wants to move. It really does. And when it does, you feel better. But people like to give themselves this excuse. I do not have the energy to do this. If you decide that, that's true. But if you watch a motivational video, there's 100 of them on YouTube, thousands even. You go watch one, you'll get fired up. You're like, fuck it, I'm gonna jump some rope. You jump some rope, you do something. Just do some push-ups, do something, do some body weight squats. You'll feel better. But it's also like learning that and having that as a part of your daily life. It has to be, again, I'm not talking about someone like you who's in the throes of this autoimmune disorder where you're getting your hip replaced at 17. I'm not talking about someone with like serious degenerative illness. I'm talking about just a regular person who's overweight. You can do it. There's a lady who's like 450 pounds that takes yoga with me. She's enormous. She's in there. Very hard to do.
Yeah.
And she's in there. Anyone could do it. We can do it. And again, I'm not saying do what Michael Phelps does. I'm just saying, just do something. Gotta do something. We have fucked up lifestyles. The human body is not designed to sit down all day, and it's certainly not designed to be stuck in traffic and be in an office and just be, fluorescent lights and just sitting there in front of a fucking computer monitor watching your soul get sucked through the LCD screen. It's crazy. Like, our bodies, for whatever reason, most people, their associations are to avoid anything that's uncomfortable. But it's so illogical, because when you look at comfort and you look at success and progress and the feelings of accomplishment and of getting past certain hurdles in terms of like how you feel about life, a lot of those are connected to discomfort. Like, discomfort is your friend. It really is. Like, discomfort and not being happy and content with certain situations in life or certain feelings in life, they're massive motivators, and they're amazing at facilitating change, and yet are instinct is to avoid those and just sit on the couch and watch some fucking reality show about dudes who make moonshine with our jaw open, like, ugh. It's bizarre. I think in a lot of ways, we rely on momentum. We rely on the momentum of past experiences where you're just conditioned to do that. It's one of the things that you do. And for me, at least, when I get like really disciplined, I get really consistent with my workouts. One of the things that I almost feel momentum. I feel like there's like a push behind me, like, all right, like after I get out of the gym, I have a really good workout. I'm like, yeah, now I'm doing it. I'm doing it all the time now. And I'm looking forward to the next time. And it makes that resistance much weaker, and it makes my motivation and my discipline much stronger. I think a lot of it is based on just the consistency. It's one of the things that I talked about recently on the podcast. I said, like blowing something off is not just bad for you physically, it's also bad mentally, because then that option is now available. The option to fuck off is available. And you did it before, and you're probably going to do it again, and you'll get mediocre results, not just in that aspect of your life, but maybe in all aspects of your life. Because I think that option to fuck off, when you embrace it, that is a pathway that you might choose when it comes to dealing with conflict in your personal life, dealing with business decisions, dealing with career decisions, like an uncomfortable decision that you might be faced with, where maybe you need to make a change, but you don't do it, and instead you fuck off. And that the inclination to fuck off, I think, that gathers momentum as well. The inclination to be disciplined, that comes with momentum too. And I think both things, like you take a path, like the path of the healthy person or the path of the fuck off. Well, this is I wrote a note earlier because we were talking about depression, and I've always wondered if the depression that people see en masse today, there's so much depression, that it's a common trait. Like it's a common condition. Oh, he suffers from depression. Oh, she suffers from depression. Like, oh, he's got herpes, It's like it's a common thing. I've always wondered, or I've been wondering more and more recently. It really hit me have you ever seen Heinmo's Arctic Adventure? And this guy lives in this incredibly remote area of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in the Alaskan interior. And he lives in this really small log cabin, and he hunts and gathers, and that's all he does. And he's very smart. He lives with his wife, and he raised children up there, and it's really, really, there's some dark moments in there because they lived like this from the time like when they had children up there, and they lost their 2-year-old baby in a fucking canoe. Like they tipped over in a canoe and lost their kid, and it's really intense when they revisit the site and leave flowers. And it was like 30 years ago, and they had several children since then, but this moment is still like this intense moment of loss for them when they lost their baby. But this fucking guy is very happy, and he firmly believes that human beings, when we evolved and developed and we're hunter-gatherers, that there's a set of rewards. There's reward systems that are set up inside the human body, inside the very being that we embody, that don't get met in today's society. And it's one of the things that's causing depression. One of the things that's causing this funk that people are in is that we're living our lives in these very unfulfilling ways, where you're going to this office with artificial light and you're doing something you don't want to do all day long, and then you get home and you're tired. And on top of that, you're eating shit. You're eating potato chips and you're drinking soda, and your body is just like, what in the fuck is this? We're supposed to be out in the fields. We're supposed to be walking up hills. We're supposed to be looking for animals or gathering vegetables. We're supposed to be doing all these things that our body's designed to do. We're supposed to be in nature. Yeah. And nature is like a medicine. Like it literally is a medicine to you. Like people that go, you don't have to go hunting, you don't have to go fishing, just go fucking hike, man. Just go hike up to the top of a mountain and look out. There's a reward that you get from that is intensely like soul-filling. Mm-hmm. There's like something about, like when I was in Colorado, and there was this area of Boulder where you drive up one of these roads, and there was this area where you could park. And it was this incredible view, man. And these people just park and just go out there and just look. But you get there and you park and you go, fuck. Because you would see, you're literally seeing the Continental Divide. These snow-capped mountains in July. Yeah. In July, it's covered with snow because those mountains don't give a fuck.
Perspective. Just this whole new perspective on it. And I think nature, the ease of suffering is always in presentness. When you're in presentness, truly locked in presentness, there is no suffering. There can be pain, but no suffering. Suffering is something created by our own minds. And I think nature is one of the great ways to do this, because humans, we take cues from our environment. And nature, as I was saying earlier, is always in the present. There's this natural presentness of all the animals, everything around you. Whereas if you get around a bunch of people watching housewives and stressed about this and popping pills, you're going to take on that energy too, and you're going to lose your presentness because of your surroundings. So it's like this ultimate regrounding tool where we get back to present moment again. And that's such a fucking key element to human happiness. And I think the other key element is having something we're fighting for, having a mission. I think we're all forces, and that force needs to have an effect, needs to have a reason that it's moving in a certain direction. And I think with all of our needs met, where we don't have to hunt for food, we don't have to acquire everything's relatively easy, and it's all about advancement and all this, we've lost a lot of the basic mission, which was the mission to survive and procreate, and we haven't replaced it with any other universal mission, which is, I think, one of the big allures of these things like wars and these things like creating an enemy. Well, at least then you have a mission, and when you have a mission, human beings are happy. Bertrand Russell talked about, he did the book Conquest of Happiness, and he had his own fucked up attributes. But anyways, he talked about the happiest person he knew. The happiest person he could find was a groundskeeper on a manor who every day woke up and was at war with the rabbits of the grounds. He just declared that the rabbits were the fucking enemy, and he would go out with his gun and he would hunt as many as possible, and he would go morning till night, and he would kill as many rabbits as he could, because the rabbits were the ones eating the hedges and the flowers and whatever. So he basically made the rabbits his enemy and struck out every single day to kill as many rabbits as possible. And that dude, according to Bertrand Russell, was happy as fuck.
He had a task.
He had a task. He had a purpose. He had a mission. My mission is to destroy the rabbits.
I used to have a dog like that.
Yeah.
I had the happiest dog ever. His name was Frank Sinatra. And he was a pit bull that all he lived for was killing lizards. And my house, my old house, not the house I'm in now, but my old house, and there's this one wall where these lizards would run up the wall. And so Frank, I would literally let him out in the morning, and he would fucking bolt out that door. It's like, time to go to war. And he would run and go look for these lizards. And he would stand there, like Eddie Bravo would just watch it and marvel. He'd be like, fuck, man, this dog does this every day. This dog does this every day. I go, this is what he loves to do. And he would go there, and he would have his paws on the wall, and he would, and he would go crazy, and he would jump up and try to grab a lizard, and occasionally he would get one. And he'd be like, fuck yeah. And he would get one, and he would go looking for another one. He would go, and he was a pretty big yard, so he would go wandering around the yard looking for anything else that fucked up, anything else that was slipping. There was constantly, unfortunately, twice I had to take him to the hospital because he got bit by rattlesnakes, because rattlesnakes were slipping too, apparently. He killed the rattlesnakes, but the rattlesnakes fucked him up. He had like a water balloon growing out of the side of his head. But this dog was so goddamn happy. He had missions. Yeah. He would go out of that yard, and he wasn't bored. He was like, please take me for a walk. Come on, man. He was like, see ya, dude. I'd open that door. He was gone. He just had his little mission. That I could not exist in a regular job. I didn't have it, whatever it was.
Yeah, it's a thing. When you know you don't have it, it's kind of scary. Like, oh no, I'm not gonna have a straight life. Oh no, what am I gonna do?
It was like it was radioactive. Like I would take construction jobs, and it was like I was being poisoned.
Yeah.
It was like literally like I was getting radiation.
Yeah, you feel like
it.
you're dying.
Yeah.
You're young and you're awake, and you're like, I'm dying. This is killing me. I didn't know where I was gonna go or what I should be doing, but I knew that this wasn't it.
Yeah.
Like this was gonna kill me.
Well, I think there's a lot of people out there like that, and for some awful reason, they never find whatever it is that can break them free. They never catch a ride on that river out.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it had come from martial arts too. I'd fought a lot, and I'd competed a lot in martial arts tournaments, and I think that from that I realized that like these unconventional paths, they brought me something that I wasn't getting from regular life. It brought me self-esteem. It gave me this feeling that I wasn't a loser. It was the only thing that I'd ever done my whole life where I've said, wow, maybe I'm not a loser.
Right.
Like I kind of thought I was an outcast and a loser, and then all of a sudden I was successful at something only because I was obsessed with it. But then I knew there was no way I was ever going to be able to hold a regular job and then I got lucky when I was 21 and I found stand-up. And so from then on, I'd kind of like locked into this thing where I'm just going to do what I like and fuck what everybody says, because everybody's giving me advice to do this and advice to do that, and it never seems to be what I want to do.
And their advice is coming from a different world.
Yeah.
You know, and they mean well, but they're coming from the whole other value system and a whole other expectation of their own lives and what your life should be and all of that. And all of it is... It's not poison, but it's just kind of anathema to every breath you're taking, and is ultimately useless. Because and they're always going to tote that line. That's what they've got. Like, you've got what you've got. So when you say, here's how I do it, they're like, you're crazy, man. And then you look at them in that job and you're like, you're the crazy one amongst us, because I couldn't handle wearing that tie every day and taking it from that dude.
Yeah, and some people, I guess, like the corporate world. I got lucky and I found a bunch of shit that I like. And if you had said to me, you know, if you asked me if I was, you know, outside of my life, and if I didn't know that I existed, and you said, do you think it's possible to be a cage fighting commentator / stand-up comedian? I'd be like, no.
Right.
They don't go together.
There's a kind of guts where you just get on that bus every day and go like, damn, man, I don't like this job. And you grimly hold onto your sack lunch and you just go do it. I think like my mom and my dad, and I'm not sure how much they ever really loved their jobs. Like, I can't wait to go to the office. They just kind of went, I'm an adult and this is what you do. And they just kind of put themselves through that grinder and turn the handle themselves. Yeah. You know, and they just... And I think a lot of people all over the world, they just kind of grimly set their jaw and go, I'm an adult, and they go out into it.
I think one of the reasons why these people have this deep-seated anger and resentment is there's a bunch of people out there that have these lives that are deeply unsatisfying, because I think somehow or another, through momentum and through things falling into place the way they are, and people trying to fit their lives around the way these pieces have fallen into place, there are so many people that are working all day long doing something that is deeply unsatisfying and almost painful to them.
Yeah, soul killing.
Soul killing. Yeah. They're stuck in traffic all day, and then they're stuck in a cubicle after that. They relish the time to take a shit in the bathroom and look at their phone. I mean, they literally do that. That's a highlight of someone's day. They get in traffic on the way home. They get home after that, they're watching television, and they're fucked. They have deep debt. This is not like there's this soul-killing thing is not giving them any freedom.
The debt's huge, dude. And you know what? You sit there and go, and you look at what people make, and you sit there and go, you can make quite a lot of money by average Joe standards and still not be in good shape. And so I know people turn around, make good living, really good living, and turn around and go, I'm just holding my head above water.
Yeah.
Right? And so you go, okay, if you're holding your head just barely, what's a person making a third or a quarter of what you're making doing? I mean, this is really, when you talk about revolutions happening and things going down in weird, unpredictable, negative ways, and we've talked about this before, you let enough of your society fall into the loser class, for lack of a better word, winners and losers in society. Every society can suck up a certain amount of people not able to make it. But if that number gets large enough, revolutions happen.
I think so too, but I think that revolution doesn't necessarily have to be violent. I think the revolution can be a revolution of action and ideas, and I think that there's a ton of people out there that are probably listening to this that would like to be able to do something else.
Absolutely.
Whether it's make furniture.
Well, they don't want a revolution.
Right.
They want to do something that's not soul-killing.
Yeah, if you make furniture for a living, and you feel a great satisfaction out of that, and you sell that furniture. Look, man, making furniture feels good. If you can do that, you could cut those corners perfectly and sand everything down nice and stain it, and then it's done, and you get this satisfaction, and you sell it to someone, and that pays your bills. That is infinitely more satisfying than being stuck in some fucking cubicle working for someone that you don't want to work for, having to have these stupid fucking office meetings, talking to people in human resources, sitting down with your supervisor where they evaluate your job performance, and you're not really, you really need to be enthusiastic about this company. This company is your future. This kind of like, you're like, fuck, kill me now. There's a lot of people out there that would way rather do something else, and I hope they understand that they can.
Let's talk about that, because we're in that. We're in that subject because we've been talking about us and podcasting and new media and whatever. But really, and I rarely like to give advice, because you don't want to be responsible for people acting on it and having it not turn out well. But what I tell people is two things. Right now, the United States of America, the way it's built, is built to help industry and corporations and companies. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be Microsoft. It can be you. right?
Yeah, you can have your own thing.
And let's talk about the furniture builder. Once upon a time, there are huge things in your way, including needing to get loans and all these other things to just start a business. So you're behind the 8 ball right away, and the pressure's on because if it doesn't work, you're in debt. Whereas, I mean, we started these podcasts. There's no brick or mortar. I mean, now you've got just the Rogan Tower. It's a little bit different. But once upon a time, it's like in the back of your bedroom, and you've got a company, and it's got a show, and people are listening. If you make your furniture, and you don't have to have a brick and mortar store, but you can put a website up, make it with Squarespace or one of those other things, and all of a sudden you have a business out of your house. The freedom, the satisfaction, the ability to set your own hours, and here's the best part, the fact that if you start making a lot of money somehow, you're not going to have your boss cut your commissions. I mean, I knew sales guys who made so much money that their bosses cut their commissions because you can't make more than your bosses. Well, listen, when you have your own small business, the sky's the limit. If you make $10 million, you make $10 million.
Yeah.
So I always tell people that if you can, and it's not always something they can do, maybe you do it on the side when you've got your regular job, starting a small business now, in this climate that we have right now, is not only possible, it's not that much of a gamble, because if worse comes to worse, you didn't invest $100,000 you didn't have starting it all the time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that website didn't cost you that much. You know, the investment for the tools you may have had already. Podcasting's a perfect example. We make business, like my buddy says, we sell zeros and ones.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Well, it's never been easier to have a website either.
No.
Easier with companies like Squarespace. You could develop a website. You could literally build an amazing website in a
and
fucking
sell your
hour.
furniture.
And you
right?
have a free online store with it, and they have these drag and drop user interfaces. You use photos, you drag them onto there, size it in place, boom. Next thing you know, you've got a website. Sell your furniture, sell whatever the fuck you make, whether you make clothes or you're designing backpacks, or there's a lot of people out there that have interests and they've never pursued those interests because they're fucking tired from doing boring, soul-sucking
It's
job.
hard to go to work and put your effort into that and then come home and then work for yourself. It's very hard. But I'll tell you what, there's a part, like you said, there's a part of it that once you start making stuff for yourself, that's self-motivating, right? I told somebody to start a podcast. I said, the first time you get some feedback email, that will kick you in the rear end to keep doing it becomes life is a verb, I always say, and you have to actually act. But by acting, you change everything in your future. Another guy said to me, it's a great line. He said, with podcasts, it's not always how many people are listening. Sometimes it's who they are, right? So my grandmother's philosophy was always that you should keep walking and talking. But in her era, walking and talking meant going and shaking people's hands. And now you can network like through the internet, and you never are really shaking people's hands, but you may have a podcast with only 100 listeners. But if one of those listeners is some guy somewhere else who says, oh my God, this guy's furniture is great, or whatever, I'm gonna, maybe you can come and start giving a Pottery Barn, okay? I mean, things open up in ways that you can't predict because you started doing something.
And because you have legitimate passion for what you're
Yes.
doing, that resonates
Doesn't
with people
feel
that
like
experience that. Yeah. If they I can't tell you how many artists that I've discovered online just through Instagram or through Twitter. Like
this
someone
is
will send me
it's a creative revolution.
Yes, in an amazing way. And I hope, and I think there's way more creative people out there than we realize.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And I think they would love to have some sort of an opportunity to do something like that, and especially like an artist. Someone who's an artist, man, there's never been a better time to be an artist, because you could showcase your work. And look, if you send me something cool and you send it to me on Twitter, and I'll fucking retweet it.
Totally.
We tweet things all the time. And all that takes is someone else has to see that and say, wow, that's amazing. And then it just propagates to all these different people's Instagram feeds and all these people's Twitter feeds. And next thing you know, you've got a business and you're up and running. And it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be quick.
But the job you're doing now ain't easier, quick. The soul-killing one ain't easier, quick either.
But people think like, oh, how long is that going to take? Oh, but when you start out doing a podcast, well, I only got 10 downloads. Well, that's how it works.
We all were there once.
Yeah, I was there once. Dude, when we first did it, when Brian and I were first doing this podcast and we were doing it on like Ustream, we would have 200 viewers. And I wasn't doing it for money. I was literally doing it because my wife had gotten pregnant. We had to move from Colorado back to LA, and I was bummed out. I was like, fuck, I thought I escaped. I thought I got out of LA. I was living in the mountains. I was like, this is what I want. I want to be in nature. I was like, I don't want to be back in this fucking hellhole. Like, all right, let's do something. And so we started doing podcasts just for a goof, because I was doing stand-up. That was all well and good.
But look at how it tied into your stand-up so nicely.
Yeah,
you know?
But my point is, it didn't start out, I didn't start out thinking this is going to replace my income. This is going to be, I just did it as a passion project. And I think if people have a regular day job, if you could just find one thing that you do as a passion project and just keep building on it, just keep watering it, keep adding fertilizer, keep giving it attention, keep giving it focus, and you can escape. You can escape, and you can be self-serving. You could be okay. You're going to be okay.
I always ask people when they want to start it, like a podcast, I'll say something like, how many listeners would you have to have for you to care? Right?
Yeah.
And that's a magic number that's different for everybody, right? But what's great about what we do that's different from broadcasting is that there is a giant pie of people. Let's pretend it's 1 billion. And if you're going to do a podcast on science fiction comic books from the 1950s or something that has such a narrow audience, they'd never put it on television because it's too narrow, you will be able, if you even get 0.00001% of that billion pie, it's not only going to be a decent number of people in terms of what you would think is successful, but they are going to be so enthusiastic because this is an outlet that they don't have. It's like I always tell somebody, if you're into Harry Potter, what are the TV networks giving you? But there's multiple Harry Potter podcasts.
Listen to this. You want to hear something crazy?
Sure.
Time Magazine just had some top 50 podcast thing, and a buddy of mine who was angry that he wasn't on sent me some stuff about it. And one of the things he said, dude, there's a fucking podcast on there called The Gilmore Boys. That's two guys sitting around talking about the Gilmore Girls television show. There's another one called something about Richard Simmons, where there's
Finding Richard Simmons,
where they're trying to figure out why Richard Simmons went into hiding.
What's so great about that idea, though, and again, and you at home can learn this too, what's so great about that idea is that they instantly tied their podcast to somebody who already had tons of fans.
Yes.
Right? So you sit there and go, I don't know who these guys are or what this, but I'm a huge Richard Simmons fan, so I'll listen. And that's like instant audience, isn't it?
And there's another podcast called Guys We Fucked. These girls came up with this podcast. And this is one that I always use as an example because who are the girls from Guys We Fucked? Find their names. These comedians from New York, they came, and they're actually going to be on the podcast Monday.
Ooh, that was a clever tie-in.
I didn't mean to, but I used them as an example because we just booked this earlier today.
Christina Hutchinson and Corinne Fisher.
And they came up with this clever idea for the title, and it became huge. I mean, it's always top 10. It's like one of the top 10 comedy podcasts. And people say, oh, well, today it's saturated. No, it's not, stupid. You just do something that's good. Stop saying it's saturated. If you're good, it'll stand out. This idea that, like, oh, it's easy for you to say. Everybody's got these stupid barriers they put in their own head. You got to resist those goddamn things because they don't do you any good, and they certainly define the potential for your future in a negative way that's not self-serving, and it's not even real. You know, you put this artificial ceiling on the potential for what you're doing. If you hit a wall, okay, that just means you need to regroup and rethink. It doesn't mean that wall's there, especially when it comes to something like social media or like a podcast, something where you're putting out a piece of art, you're putting out something that you've created. There's no wall as far as like how many people are going to enjoy it or how far it's going to go. It's just, it is what it is. And if people don't like it, make it better. If they like it less, fix that. Figure out a way to do it. You can do that. And this idea that there's no way to get past the starting block today is just ludicrous. It's crazy. And it's just this poor thinking. And people that are trapped in bad situations, one of the problems is you feel like this is your future. You feel like you're fucked and you can't get out of that. There's no hope. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. There's no rainbow. And if you feel like that alone can be incredibly defining and limiting. But if you look at yourself objectively and say, okay, I kind of am fucked here. I'm in credit card debt. I'm working in a shitty job. I don't like what I'm doing, but I have some ideas. I need to feed those fucking ideas. And I need to feed them and water them, and I need to set aside a certain amount of time every day to just try to make those things happen. You can do that.
I like visual images. You know, we use that in the hardcore history a lot. These, what's it like to fight an elephant with a spear? Things like that. I like those. But the
it's
image,
like to die. That's what it's like.
the image I have though for what you're talking about, I've always thought it's a little like a running back in football who takes the ball and who goes forward, and there's no hole, right? All you run into is the back of your offensive lineman. But if you keep hitting, if a hole is going to open up, boom, you'll squirt through. Now, there's no guarantee in life the hole will be there, but there is a guarantee that if you're not continually smacking at it, then when it opens up, you won't be ready, right? And so I don't know about you, Joe. You've had a charmed life, I think, in how well you've done. But I mean, some of us have failed many times.
I've failed at a bunch of shit.
I'm teasing you.
I really have.
But I guess what I'm saying is I remember being a TV reporter at a small station, and I would get out of work at like midnight, and the story that I just spent all day on aired, and it was awful. And I would get out, and I would literally, this is when I still had quite a bit of hair, I would sit there and you pull your hair out. You go, what am I doing? Right? This is horrible. And I look back on those now, and I think, what if you had just given up then? Right? Or the podcast. I mean, do you know how my wife did a great thing for me? We'd had that company that I just told you about, that we were trying to do the new media thing, and it just fell apart like everybody's companies were starting to do. And I'd wasted a lot of time and a lot of money in my life doing that. And she would have been totally justified in saying, that's it. You're going to Indianapolis, get a talk radio show job, wherever they'll hire. But she didn't. She said, you know what? You try this next thing. You could do it. And here we are. And I think, if you hadn't tried, it's that weird thing. And folks, I tried being a TV reporter. You try all those things, and either they're not successful, or they're moderately successful, or they're successful but not enough for you. The thing that makes people the most sad in life, and I already have a couple of friends my own age who are there, is the regrets, right? They're not sorry they failed, they're sorry they didn't try. And the funny thing is, some of them are only 50 and they think, okay, my window to try is already gone, which is wrong too. But folks, you will be so happy. There's so many things that have happened in my life because I got my first talk radio show job. I was a reporter. I covered this story. There was some big guy showing up at the local radio station. And as I was leaving, I wrote a letter to the program director to say, thanks for having us. And I thought, do I mail this? Do I not mail it? Do I mail it? And just, I closed my eyes and I mailed it. He called me 2 days later. So you want a job? What if you didn't send that letter? It's so stupid, the little things that your life can hinge on. But if you don't do them, you don't give fate an opportunity to intervene.
I think here's an important thing too. Failure is important.
It is important.
I think failure teaches you things that you don't learn from success. I think failure gives you an opportunity for self-examination. It also gives you a feeling that is very uncomfortable. And that very uncomfortable feeling helps you grow. That when you feel like shit and you screw something up, like when I've had bad podcasts, my podcast has always gotten better afterwards. When I've had bad stand-up sets, I've always gotten better after that, because those bad sets motivate you. They give you a perspective like, hey, here's some clear examples of where you fucked up.
Yeah, what not to do.
Yeah, don't look at these failures as like proof that you suck. Look at them as opportunities for growth. Look at them as opportunities to be motivated to do better.
And Winston Churchill had a line about reading quotes, about how inspirational reading famous quotes were. And he says they motivate you from a number of different ways, including the idea that, you think it's just you, or you think that these people who did so well were so incredibly gifted or privileged from the get-go. And when you realize, no, they're more like me than I think, that becomes inspirational, right? You telling your audience this is inspirational. You don't want to hear, go back to school, go do this work. No. But if you hate your job, that is like nature telling you to try something different. And it's motivating because the motivation is you might not have to do that soul-killing job anymore.
Well, if you look at someone who's doing really well, like say if you focus on like Kevin Hart or someone like that, some very famous and successful comedian, all you see is him now flying around private jets, wearing a new pair of sneakers every day, driving around in Bentleys. You just see that. You don't see him being a young kid in Philadelphia, going to open mic nights, scratching and clawing,
MC Hammer
jokes.
selling the tapes out of the hatchback.
All that stuff, man. There's a path, and we think of people like, you see an old person walking down the street, you go, oh, that person's always been an old person. No, that was a baby. That was a baby that became a 90-year-old man. There's a progression that you're not witness to. You don't see it. And that takes place in everything. It takes place in authors. It takes place in comedians and musicians. There is a starting point, and then with time and focus, and as long as you reevaluate and reassess and constantly objectively look at what you're doing and then pursue it with passion and focus, you get better at things. I think there's a certain amount that you have to do that's boring, right? There's a certain amount of the hard work.
Even in your
learning
business that you
mathematics.
like.
Sure,
Yeah.
learning grammar, learning language. A certain amount of that stuff is fucking boring. Once you get past that boring shit and you have a base understanding of how to communicate, how to add, how to count, how to multiply, how government works, all these different things that you should have sort of a base understanding of, then it's like everyone has a different personality. They have different interests, different things that they would be really satisfied pursuing. That's not encouraged. What's encouraged is go find a job. What's encouraged is go find some place that you can shove yourself into. Go find a square hole that you can stick your round peg and just fucking jam it in there and shave down the top and the bottom so you slide in with all this extra space on the sides and feel like shit for the rest of your life because you need a job, because you're in debt, because you have credit cards, because you have student loans, because that's what everybody does. And so you do it too. That's what's wrong. What's wrong is that we don't give, it's like we let them figure it out on their own, and it fucking takes forever. It took forever for me. The only thing that I had going for me was that I was crazy and that I had been spending most of my high school years fighting, so that I was already so far outside of anybody that I was so weird. I didn't fit in anywhere.
I was weird too. Isn't that funny?
I didn't feel like I had a pot. I knew one thing. I couldn't work like a regular job. Like I had to figure out something else. Because like there's the idea of, it was literally the idea of being in an office was like torture.
Okay, can I just tell you, so that's the hinge point. The difference between you and this. So here's, if I was creating a fantasy educational system, the hinge point between what you just said is that you said, I couldn't stand this, I couldn't work the real job, I couldn't fit into this, so I did something, I had to find another way. A lot of people get stuck with the "so I had to find another way" part, right? You know, it's funny because, you know, your kids are young enough too, so you went through this. But I mean, when my kids were really young, before they were in the school they're in now, we put them in one of those Montessori schools. You know, the ones.
How are those? So like everybody goes together?
No, it's different school to school, but the basic concept is that you don't force the children to learn anything specific. You have all these things around, and the children go to what they want to do. So the upside's obviously that from the get-go they're only reading what they're into, or the downside, of course, is that there's all this other stuff you're supposed to learn. It's the dichotomy between how do you know, you had talked about needing to have these skills, little math skills. You need some basic foundational stuff. But something is also happening at that level, which is you're finding out which students are into math and would like to have a career in math. Other people are being touched by a foreign language in a way that they think, I'd like to learn more, I'd like to speak it fluently, I'd like to teach it. So in a way, you're already beginning to select what kids are into by exposing them to this stuff. Most of us find it boring, but there might be something. That's where I first found history as a discipline, right? If most kids say, oh God, the last thing I want to hear is some history, but I get turned on by it. Okay, well then it's worth exposing you to all those things. I think the problem is, though, is that it would be great, for example, to have half your schooling, maybe at that young age, be sort of a Montessori model where you say, okay, we spent our time on reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now we want you to go around, and it has to be, you can't be playing video games unless playing video games is what you want to do for a living and you're going to be able to do some educational work on it. But I mean, I would love to see more of a fostering for the fact that, listen, we're trying to create entrepreneurs here rather than trying to create drone workers on the Amazon assembly line. Now, if you end up on the Amazon assembly line anyway, great, good for you. I'm glad you can bring some food home. But the goal ought to be to let you start a business and maybe employ a bunch of other people, you know?
Yeah, and the goal would be to have less unhappy, dissatisfied people.
Because it creates a more stable society.
Well, also happier.
Yeah.
It creates more satisfaction. The people that I know that get to do what they want to do for a living, it's not like their lives are completely happy. Everybody's going to face problems, no matter who you are.
Absolutely. You know, what did it was a Kanye West who said, do rich people have problems? They're just different problems. I mean, it's everybody's got these challenges, but like you said, there's not a lot more stressful than having a ton of credit card debt, wondering, you know, if you're going to lose your house, wondering how you're going to pay for your kids' education. I mean, all those things are soul crushing.
Not only that, because you're in debt, you get nervous, so it suppresses your ability to express yourself and take risks. Because it's a cycle. You don't want to lose your gig. You don't want to, you know, it's like, man,
and you're tired.
No way to live.
You're tired. I mean, the one thing is, as you get older, I mean, it's funny because getting older is one of those things that you can only understand when you get there. So all through your life, you're going through these, God, isn't this the interesting part of being in your 30s or being in your 40s? So as I go into my 50s now, I'm sitting here going, energy is so under talked about.
Yeah.
You know, the ability to, like my buddy who wrote me and said, you know, I feel like I screwed up my life. I didn't take enough chances. I played it safe and now I'm so unhappy. He says, and I just can't motivate myself at 50 years old anymore, energy-wise, to start over. Energy is underrepresented.
Well, tell
it's
that
hard.
guy he's got to fix his health.
I knew you were going to say that.
That's what it is. Your health is your engine.
Yeah,
your
it is.
health is literally the chassis, the tires, the brakes, the engine of your vehicle that you move through this life with. And too many people don't pay attention to it.
The lack of energy is a killer, and as you get older especially.
It's not just that. It changes your ability to do things. If you don't have energy, not only will you not have the energy to pursue things, but you won't be able to do them the same way. If you have energy and enthusiasm and say like you're healthy and you want to write a book, you're going to have thoughts that'll come into your mind that won't come into your mind if you're exhausted.
Agreed.
And that's fucking huge. That's huge for anything you're trying to pursue, whether we're talking about furniture making, whether we're talking about being an author, whatever it is.
Let's talk about ideas for a minute, because I think that's another one. When we talk about small businesses or starting as an entrepreneur, I'm one of those people that is not sure that we don't have a finite number of ideas to each of us, and all of them are valuable enough, even if they don't appear to be on the surface, to write down.
Yeah.
Right? As a matter of fact, I went to a business meeting a couple years ago with one of these TV guys I was just talking about, and we go to this business meeting, and we're all on our phones and whatever, and he pulls out an old-fashioned journal that you write in, and he just starts writing. And I looked at that and I thought, in one sense, he looks like a dinosaur, but I went out and bought one. And now it's crazy how often, all I do is write ideas in it. And a lot of them I look back on now and I go, okay, that's still stupid. But other ones I look back on and go, God, I didn't know what this idea meant at the time, but 5 years later, this idea is really, I guess what I'm saying is that if you wanted to take almost like a religious view of it, God only gives you so many, write down and cherish the ideas. But there is something to that. Folks, what really is going to make you unique sometimes is the way your brain works differently than anyone's brain who's ever existed on the planet. That's valuable right there. Write down what comes out of the brain, because you
capture those things.
Yes,
because if
capture
you don't
them.
capture them, they will slip away.
And sometimes the idea isn't good until the second half arrives later, right? So idea number 1's in your book from 5 years ago. Idea number 2 that finally completes that idea arrives later. I mean, I had a friend who was so creative, and he said he gets the best ideas at night. So he just turns on the light at the side of the table, writes it down in the book, and by morning there's another idea down there.
Yeah.
And quantity has a quality all its own, and sometimes a book filled with interesting ideas out of your individual unique head will help you later on. So write them down.
Yeah, you have
There's no
to.
downside.
I have an app on my phone where I can just, the Notes app. You ever use that?
Sure,
where
sure.
it has a little microphone.
It's filled with
I
stuff.
talk into that thing.
I do too.
And it dictates it really almost perfectly. So I'll have an idea and I'll just be driving down the road. I just press that button. I start talking into it and then I put it down. I got it. I got that one. I captured it.
Think about people who had one fantastic idea in their life and built their whole life on it.
Yeah.
And you never know which idea that's going to be. And you know what? I was an improv. Again, you know more about this than I do, but I was a theater major for my first 2 years of college, and we did improv comedy. And the guy who taught us improv in high school, really, he had a great line. He said, that part of your brain, like every part of your brain, is a muscle. And he said, the more you're thinking, okay, I got to show this Friday that I have to come up with something funny for, the better you get at it.
Yeah.
And you start looking, your brain starts looking at things and finding things. So you're almost like training it to help you now in this new endeavor. It's a very plastic sort of an approach, but it's the same thing with the ideas. One idea in your little book that you wrote down could make your life, your child. I mean, if you're Henry Ford, I mean, how many people did you employ for decades afterwards because of a good idea? I mean, our world is built on those things.
And also, like, the idea of having these ideas and the enthusiasm that comes from it, like, it starts to escalate and you start to calculate like, oh, and I need more, and I need this, and maybe that, and then the motivation and the momentum of these ideas can lead to enthusiasm.
And you
that-
attract other people who who can add. And I mean, this is what we said about, like, you start your website and you just do it, because things, once you push the verb of living manages to create ripples into, get a little metaphysical here, but ripples in time in front of you that open up possibilities. And because someone may, if you only have one podcast listener, but that podcast listener is like, wow, that's great, I'm gonna, and gets a hold of you, and your life goes off in another different direction. But you have to try. You have to try.
And I think you can see that in the people who are the most unhappy. They seem aimless.
Yeah.
They're like, what am I here for? Why am I doing this? Nothing makes sense, you know? And I've even felt it in my own life when, you know, I know what my mission here is. First, my mission is to expand human consciousness, to help people be happy. Like, that's really what I find my greatest purpose in. But every once in a while, I'll get this kind of like fuck people attitude. Maybe someone said some fucked up shit. I'm like, man, people fucking suck. Fuck people. And then at that moment, that's when I'm actually depressed, you know, because I've lost my mission. Instead of having a mission like, yes, my mission is human consciousness, all of a sudden it's like, fuck people, fuck that mission, they'll figure it out. And then I'm depressed because I've lost my purpose.
It's very hard to rise above, like, literally, when something like that happens, and realize, like, oh, you're encountering one diseased individual. You got to look at the mass of humanity.
Yeah.
Like, when you encounter one diseased individual, it's so, like, this guy who shot up that nightclub in Orlando, you're looking at one diseased individual. And if you say, man, people fucking suck, look at what they did. Well, look at how many people that are responding with rainbows on their Twitter pages and love and all the best wishes to those folks that got killed and all their. I mean, I was looking at this guy's page who's an animal lover who was organizing people to go to the homes of the victims and see if they have pets that are trapped. You know, there's beautiful people out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's more beautiful people. This is without a doubt not just the safest, the easiest. This is the happiest time in terms of, like, being able to, like, reach out and send love to people and have people send love to you. But just occasionally you run into cunts.
Yeah, no
You
doubt.
know? And the cunts itself, man.
But the beauty is out there too. It's just
Yeah.
not as dramatic, and it doesn't impose upon us as forcefully. But if we just look, it's around all the time. We run into good people all the time. But you know, you just make eye contact with that good person or that kid who's just looking at you and just creeping with that little smile, and you're like, oh yeah, the good of humanity, the fact that, you know, we really are love, you know, being expressed, you know, outwardly all the time, and it's just these other delusions that get in the way of that.
Well, we're oddly attracted to negativity too. It's almost like we look at negativity online or that you run into as like a possibility of war. Like, you have to look out, there's fucking drums beating. God damn it, there's an army on the background. They're coming. But, you know, it's like this real impulse to sort of batten down the hatches. When really it's just some fucking 36-year-old loser sitting in his parents' basement, angry online. I mean, that's really what a lot of you're dealing with. You're dealing with, like, really sick people, like people that have just, for whatever reason, they've not found their path. They've not found any happiness. They've not found any fulfillment. They haven't found any growth. They're just stifled or rotten in some sort of a weird way. It just hasn't really worked for them.
Yeah.
And so they're lashing out. They're lashing out at the world. And you run into one of those, and you're like, people suck.
Yeah, and that's the initial response, and then the more conscious response is to look at them and have compassion for that person.
Yeah,
you know,
that's hard to do, right?
That is hard to do, and our system isn't based upon that. Even if you look at the U.S. penal system, it's very much about punishment. Whereas if you watch that documentary that Michael Moore did, Who to Invade Nest, where they go to Norway, they have a whole different idea of what the penal system is for. It's about restoring human dignity and cultivating change in the person. It's not about punishment. It's about actually changing that individual so he doesn't do it again. And then you look at the recidivism rates between our prisons and Norway's prisons, and they're just dramatically different. That impulse to punish immediately, you know, is not the healthiest impulse. That's just going to create more issues down the road. You're not rehabilitating anybody. You're just taking even more broken people and putting them out in the world and hoping they're not going to do the broken things. Well, it's not going to fucking work. You know, the right impulse is always that compassion and looking to see, as if that was you, how all of these fucked up elements of the world and choices. I'm not overriding the fact that they had choices in all this. They're not free of guilt. But look at that like this is the person that just made some bad choices and had some tough shit to deal with and couldn't overcome it. The resistance in the video game was higher than his skill set, and he wasn't able to choose to work and choose to the positive elements that would allow them to overcome it. You know,
Yeah,
see that.
it's also Norway's dealing with far fewer people.
That's true.
You know, and that's a good thing for them. And it's also they don't have that conquerors mentality that we have. So we're so wrapped up in success and also in punishment. I mean, that is a big aspect of our culture, like punishment. And I mean, like when anybody does anything wrong online, the amount of people that feel like it's their job to shame that person and embarrass that person and insult that person, it's pretty crazy to watch when something goes down.
It's all so counterproductive, you know, and I see that in the people shaming people for appropriation, right? So let's say, for example, someone wears a headdress at a fucking festival, right? They're probably they're not doing it to mock the Native Americans, most likely. It's probably like a mild appreciation and interest. I think this looks cool. And then all of a sudden they get all this intense hate and shame and putting all of this stuff, all of these intentions on them that weren't true. Again, going back to my point about morality, it's not about the act, it's about the intentions of the act. But right now we make it all about the act. Oh, you wore this headdress, that means you're insulting thousands of years of Native Americans, you're oppressing, you're appropriating. Like, no, I fucking wasn't. I was wearing a fucking headdress. But then all of a sudden that imprint will create trauma, and that trauma will have a poisonous impact that will make them feel weird and make them want to do that to other people. So it's like you're injecting someone with a hate virus, you know, that they're gonna then pass on to other people rather than doing the opposite, you know, spreading the love herpes, where it's this contagious positivity that goes the other way. And we have those choices. You know, there's just two sets of dominoes that we can choose to take either path.